And y'all, this part was crazy. Jackie had Marshall looking like an absolute clown. This man is picking out a suit for your wedding, and you are literally having coffee with an ex. Like, the betrayal. Hi everyone, my name is Dimitri and welcome back to DimitriTube. Love is Blind Season 4. Let's talk about it. There is a lot to talk about, so let's just dive into it. As always, if you're enjoying my videos, please go ahead and pound that like button, pound that subscribe button, and ring that notification bell. I'm a growing YouTuber and the likes and subscribes really help me out. And shout out to all my new subscribers. Thank you so much for supporting my channel. Recently, I've had a lot of new subscribers on my channel and it means a lot to me. Please do not think it does not go unnoticed. I work a day job, plus I do this YouTube channel, and some weeks it's just so much work. And at times I'm just like, why am I putting in all this work? But then when I see the responses to my videos and how much you love them and how much you all are enjoying them, it pushes me to keep going. And this may sound corny, but I do get a sense of joy from knowing that I was able to make you laugh or make your day a little bit better just through my content. So again, thank you to everyone who has subscribed to my channel. It really does mean the world to me. Next, if I sound weird in this video or a little different from normal, I apologize. Allergy season is kicking my ass and I'm still a little congested. My throat's a little dry, but the show must go on and we're pushing through. Next, look at my baby. She taking a nap. Next, if you hear some surrounding noise, I apologize. I normally do not film at this time, but due to the release schedule of Love is Blind, I just had to do it. My neighbors are like up and about and you can hear it a little bit, but I don't know if you can hear it in this video. We'll find out. I'll find out at editing. And last thing before we get started, this review is going to be for episodes 6 through 10. And during episodes 6 through 10, a lot happens. I'm not going to go over everything. I'm just going to go over the things that I thought were important, because if I go over everything, we'll be here all day. So with that, let's get started. And first, I want to talk about Netflix. First, Netflix is planning to do a live reunion for this show. This is a dumb idea. Nick and Vanessa Lachey can barely do a pre-taped reunion. What makes you think they can handle a live reunion? If you're new to this show, just know every reunion so far up to this point has been terrible. Season 1's reunion was so bad they put it on YouTube for free. And this is my opinion, season 2 and 3's reunions were not good because they did not hold the women accountable. Like, they kind of just blamed everything on the men. And I'm not going to dive into the specifics of that, but if you're interested, I will post the link to my season 3 reunion review above. Next, I'm curious if Irina will even be at the reunion. I hope and pray that she is at the reunion because she was a huge part of the storyline. But like on previous seasons, if you have a love triangle in the pods, normally whoever you end up with as a couple, those are the only two that attend the reunion. The only thing that makes Irina different is that she went to the vacation in Mexico. And a good example of this is Amber. Amber was a huge part of the storyline in the pods, but given what we've seen on previous seasons, she likely will not be at the reunion. And I'm worried the same will happen for Irina, but hopefully Irina will be there. Y'all, we're just gonna pray on this, okay? We are all gonna do our nightly prayers that Irina will be at this reunion, because we need her there. We need to hear her side of the story. I want to know why she did all these messy things. And the last thing I need to talk about before we move on is location. This season of Love is Blind was filmed in Seattle, Washington. So all of the contestants were pulled from the Seattle area, or so we thought. But after watching these episodes, it becomes clear Micah lives in Arizona and then Kwame lives in Portland, Oregon. So the question becomes, why did Netflix casting pick people that live so far away from one another? And I Googled it because I'm not a geographer or anything, but Seattle is 3 hours away from Portland and Arizona is hella far away from Seattle. And we're going to talk about this later in the video, but I don't think it was a good idea for Netflix to cast contestants that live so far apart from one another. Yes, I understand they need to find people who are willing to come on the show, but also I thought for this show they very much stick to keeping people in that Seattle, greater Seattle area. But I guess they didn't do that this season. But also, by casting contestants that live so far apart, you're literally creating an obstacle to their relationship when they could have just stuck to people who live near Seattle in the first place. And we're going to talk about this more later in the video, but when Netflix does this, it feels like they're pushing for the relationships to fail instead of pushing for the relationships to work. Okay, so first up, I want to talk about Tiffany and Brett. And yes, I know you all love Tiffany and Brett, but I'm about to drag them a bit. Tiffany and Brett are the epitome of a juxtaposition. And if you don't know what a juxtaposition is, it's the fact of two things being seen or placed close together with contrasting effect. I'm going to explain this. Now, don't get me wrong. Tiffany and Brett are a happy and healthy and stable relationship. They are great. I enjoy watching them. Tiffany and Brett give the viewers the feels. But part of the reason they're so amazing is because they're placed directly in the middle of all this dysfunction. Tiffany and Brett are a breath of fresh air amidst a ton of toxicity. We literally see a dysfunctional fight between Jackie and Marshall, and then immediately after, we see a wonderful dinner between Brett and Tiffany. We see Kwame struggling with the fact that his mother may not support his wedding, and then immediately after, we get a moment with Tiffany and Brett where they discuss if they have enough closet space. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that Brett and Tiffany have a bad relationship. I'm just saying that their relationship looks better because it's juxtaposed with all these other dysfunctional relationships. Next, if you made it this far in the video, please go ahead and pound that like button for the YouTube algorithm. Next thing I want to say about Tiffany and Brett, Netflix editing this season is very tricky. Netflix is trying to tell us a story and they are working overtime to tell us a story. It is very evident that Netflix is trying to make certain contestants the villains and trying to make other contestants the heroes. And I'm not going to tell you who specifically. Y'all have been watching the season, you can figure it out. And this is just my opinion. When it comes to reality TV, there are no heroes and there are no villains. There are just ordinary people trying to live their lives. And if I can put this in any simpler way, just think of it like this. So you have heroes on the one end of the spectrum, and then you have villains on the other end of the spectrum. And most people fall somewhere in the middle. Somewhere in the middle here. And people are complex. Usually they are not one or the other. They just fall somewhere in the middle. And this brings me back to my point of Netflix editing. Netflix purposely cuts things out in order to tell a story based on how they're trying to paint that particular contestant. And this brings me back to Tiffany. So this season, we never got to see Tiffany's apartment, house, or wherever she lives. We only saw Brett's apartment. How come we never saw Tiffany's apartment? On episode 7, Brett says that we don't see Tiffany's place due to the fact that she has roommates.
I'd be moving into here?
Yeah.
Look at all these shoes.
Tiffany was with a roommate, so today we're checking out my apartment so she can see if this is a place that she would want to live in.
But when Brett gave that as a reason, I was just like, so what? She has roommates. Why does that matter? Because on season 1, Mark had roommates and we still saw his apartment. I know y'all remember how he got dragged for his brown cow sheets.
Oh my God, brown on brown on brown on brown. I've never seen this many shades of brown, actually.
I don't ever use these shades of brown, so it's kind of funny.
How now, brown cow? God. Is this a beanbag chair? I haven't had one of these in a while.
Friend and his best friend's girlfriend, so God bless him. I could never have roommates again.
I have thought a ton about what our friends and what our family.
In season 2, Salvador had a roommate and we still saw his apartment. I think him and his roommate played in a band together or something.
Here. Yo. Oh, my dude.
Hey,
what's up? Caesar.
hey, Mallory, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
De la Sierra Morena, cielito lindo, viene bajando. Pelo de San Nadie, cielito lindo, que a mí me toca.
But again, back to my main point, how come we got to see Mark and Salvador's apartment, but we don't get to see Tiffany's? And it's because Netflix editing is trying to make Tiffany a hero. On season 1 and 2, Netflix was trying to tell the story that Mark and Salvador are possibly not ready for marriage due to the fact that they still live with roommates. But when it comes to Tiffany, they're not telling the same story. And I don't think this is like a gender thing. I just think Netflix wants Tiffany and Brett to be the healthy couple of the season. Because let's keep it 100. Tiffany is 37 years old and still living with roommates. If Tiffany was a man, a lot of women would see that as a red flag. And keep in mind, this is not to drag Tiffany. I'm just pointing out that certain contestants are treated differently than other contestants in terms of editing. And last thing I want to say about Tiffany and Brett, and this is going to sound a little shady, but it's not. Tiffany won the lottery this season. When it comes to these dating shows, this is a trope we hear all the time.
It's so hard to find a good man. I'm losing hope that I'll find my person. Where did all the good men go? It's so hard to find a good man. Where did all the men go?
These are things we hear from women all the time. And now we have Tiffany, who goes on a game show on Netflix and finds the perfect guy. Tiffany is hope. Tiffany is giving hope to women all over that they will find their guy. And I think things will go well for Tiffany and Brett after the show, but due to their success from their relationship, there are going to be so many women applying to be on Love is Blind Netflix now due to Tiffany's success from the experiment. And like, don't get me wrong, Tiffany is a total catch, but the odds of finding your person at 37 are not high. And Tiffany herself even points this out. Even her mother points it out. When Tiffany was trying on dresses, her mother was like, I was starting to lose all hope that you'd find someone.
I never thought you were going to walk down the aisle. I was giving up hope. For you to do this,
you knew it had to be the right person.
I knew it had to be the right person.
And please don't get me wrong, I love Tiffany and Brett. I think they're a wonderful, healthy relationship, and I do hope they eventually get married on this show. But as you know, on this channel, I have to give my real thoughts. But we just cannot ignore the fact that Netflix is giving them a really good edit because they want them to succeed. And last thing I want to say about Tiffany and Brett, I know a lot of you are Tiffany and Brett stans, and yes, they are a fantastic couple. But if we only had a show about Tiffany and Brett, like if we just put all of Tiffany and Brett's scenes together and there were no other couples and we just played them in order, you would be very bored. And yes, there are some elements of romance there that you may find entertaining because you don't see it with other couples, but other than that, you'd probably be really bored. Now let's talk about my favorite couple, Marshall and Jackie, and they gave us all the dramatics these past few episodes. So Jackie and Marshall are discussing meet each other's parents, and this is very important because Jackie's parents are not supportive of this wedding and of her doing this experiment, but Marshall's parents are. Now keep in mind, this is Netflix with the editing tricks again. We never see Jackie's family, and then when it comes to Marshall, we only meet his sister and brother-in-law. So when Marshall says, my family is supportive, we just have to believe what he says. And then when Jackie says her family is not supportive, we just have to believe what she says. But this is different from the other couples because later on in the season, we actually meet Chelsea's dad and he's excited about her future marriage to Kwame. We meet Paul's mom and Paul's mom is excited for his future marriage with Micah. We know they're not lying because we actually met their families. Now, I'm not saying Jackie and Marshall are both lying, but I am saying as an audience, we have to take what they're saying with a grain of salt. Because now both Jackie and Marshall are arguing back and forth on Twitter, and now it's a he said, she said type of thing. But as an audience, the only truth we have is what we saw on camera. And this goes for both Jackie and Marshall. Most of the time, we're just seeing them retell what happened. We're not actually seeing it live. So it's very much a he said versus she said type of thing. But Marshall has a little bit more credibility because at least some of his family got on camera and we saw that they were supportive. His sister and his brother-in-law came to see them and they were supportive of their relationship. Anyways, moving on. So in the next scene, Marshall wakes up early to make Jackie pancakes and a strawberry capote. I think that's how you say it. And I was just like, pancakes and a strawberry capote on a Wednesday? And not only that, the pancakes he made were borderline perfect. And Jackie is shocked. She's never had a man do anything like that for her before. And at one point, Jackie said something like, oh, you're trying to get me fat. And Marshall's not trying to get you fat, but he is trying to get you a little more thick. Thick. And this part is interesting because later on we find out that Jackie thinks Marshall is way too sensitive, but honestly, some guys just like to cook. And I don't think Jackie is toxic for thinking this way. Maybe she grew up in a more traditional home where whoever was the man didn't cook. And now that a man is cooking, she just finds it unusual. But I will say it's kind of sad that Jackie is almost stuck in these traditional gender roles and she can't like move her mind past that. Next, somebody please let me know below in the comments. And this is not meant to be a read. I'm just genuinely curious. Is Jackie's hair a little fried? Like, does she need a new product or like a different product? Because to me, it just looks like she needs a little more moisture. And like, that's not trying to be a read. Like, I truly understand the black hair struggle, and it just seems like her hair just needs more moisture right now. Next, there was a scene with Marshall and Jackie when Jackie was meeting Marshall's sister and brother-in-law. And during this meeting, Marshall tells his sister that Jackie inspired him to begin writing poetry again. And y'all, we have seen this time and time again. We saw it on season 2 with Salvador and Mallory, and now we are seeing it again on season 4 with Marshall and Jackie. The women who come on this show constantly complain that they want a man who's more in touch with their emotions, and they want a guy who validates their emotions. And then when they get a guy who does that, they don't want him. They immediately want to get rid of him. Mallory on season 2 complained the guys in Chicago were way too bro, and then she meets Salvador, and Salvador wrote her love songs. He would play the guitar for her. He would cry with her, and she didn't want him, and it ended up not even working out. And now we're seeing the same thing with Marshall and Jackie. Marshall writes her poetry. He's open with his emotions. He's extra communicative, and Jackie doesn't want him. And when it comes to dating, you're never gonna find the perfect guy or the perfect girl. You just need to find the right person for you. So we can assume from Jackie's previous dating history that she's never had a guy validate her emotions, and now she's dating Marshall, who's too emotional. Jackie most likely needs a guy who falls somewhere in the middle of that. And that is something that Jackie has got to figure out, and it's going to take time. After that, Jackie and Marshall get into an argument because Jackie specifically tells Marshall to boss up and that he's not aggressive enough. Jackie says,
I never said don't be a man. I said you're not aggressive enough. We don't have sex.
When I am aggressive, you shut me down.
You're never aggressive.
And then later on, Jackie says,
you're not aggressive enough.
I'm always kissing and rubbing on you with nothing for me. What do you do to make me feel seduced or special?
Then why are you with me?
I saw you as a project and I saw potential.
And then Jackie storms off. Okay, so let's talk about this. First of all, this scene was so dramatic. Again, Netflix pulled out all the dramatics for this one. Next, Jackie got upset because Marshall left for a couple days after their argument because he wanted to cool off. Y'all, this is 2023. Marshall went to cool off for a bit because he didn't want to get out of character on camera. You know what the internet labels black men if we get out of character on camera, especially against a woman. This is just one of the problems with dating shows in general. Men get scrutinized much harder on dating shows than women do. And I think it just has to do with the fact that more women watch these dating shows than men. And if Marshall had gotten out of character because he's a black man, it would have turned into, oh, he's an abuser, he's dangerous, how could he do that to her? Like, they would have easily made Jackie the victim and Marshall the villain. So Marshall left for a few days so he could keep his calm, and I think that was a smart move. I have no problem with somebody taking a few days to remove themselves from the situation and calm down so they don't get out of character when they do have an opportunity to discuss things. Next, this is a classic miscommunication. Marshall and Jackie have two different definitions of aggressive. Jackie told Marshall, you need to be more aggressive and you need to boss up. But what does that mean? If Jackie told me,
Dimitri, you need to boss up and you need to be more aggressive,
my response would be this. Jackie, what does that mean? Like, nobody knows what that means, except Josh. Josh understands what you're talking about, but other than him, nobody knows what you're talking about. What Jackie is saying is very vague, and she's not communicating her actual needs. And the same thing happened with Brennan and Alexa on season 3. Alexa wanted Brennan to be more aggressive in the bedroom, so Alexa told him, be more aggressive in the bedroom and throw me around a bit more. So he started doing that, and they fixed the problem. But when Jackie tells Marshall, be aggressive and boss up, it's not clear what she wants. So he's very much at a standstill of what he needs to do. And later on, episode 9, it becomes even more clear that it's a miscommunication because Marshall asks Jackie to specifically tell him what to do.
Seeing everyone else tonight, I need you to lay it out for me plain. What do you need from me? What do you require from me so that I know moving forward? That's it.
Oh my gosh. I can't talk about this anymore. My brain is shot.
Marshall is trying to make this work. He is trying his best to make Jackie happy and give her what she wants, but Jackie is a poor communicator and she's not communicating her needs clearly to Marshall. Ladies, you just gotta remember, we are men. We are not mind readers. Next, Marshall called Jackie a project. Give me a project chick. One that don't give a frick. And let me know below in the comments. When Cash Money Millionaires made that song, I'm pretty sure they were talking about a girl from the projects. But Marshall is talking about a girl that he sees potential in and a girl he feels he can fix up a bit to have a future with. And like I said earlier in my video, there are no heroes and there are no villains. There are just ordinary people who make mistakes. And Marshall, in this instance, was wrong. He was wrong for making her a project and he was wrong for calling her a project. We are all people. We are not science experiments. We are not projects. We are people. And you must treat people as such. And Marshall eventually does apologize for calling her this. And he tells her he does see limitless potential in her. So then fast forward to Chelsea's birthday party. Marshall has a one-on-one with Brett and he tells him about his relationship with Jackie. And he tells Brett that Jackie wants him to slap her around a bit and that she wants this toxic kind of love. Now this part was very vague because it wasn't clear if Jackie and Marshall are just not compatible in the bedroom or if Jackie just wants a man that's more disrespectful to her. It's not very clear what Jackie wants. But Marshall does make it clear that he is not the type of guy who will do that. If he is with a woman, he will respect her. And he's not with that toxic kind of love. And at this point, Marshall and Jackie's relationship is definitely on the rocks. And that is where Netflix puts in some overtime and brings in Jackie's ex, Josh. And I don't know if Josh is a wrestler or if he's an MMA fighter or what he does, but he has that like cauliflower ear thing going on. So he definitely does something like that. And when we get introduced to Josh, it's nonstop red flags. A lot of the other contestants from the pods do not like him. Bliss, Kwame, and Marshall all do not like this guy. He's loud, he's obnoxious, and he refers to himself as a certified lover boy, which I'm gonna go ahead and say it. Yep, that is a huge red flag. If you're quoting lyrics from any of Drake's past 4 albums to describe yourself, that's a red flag. I don't care how petty that is, it's a red flag. Now, if he quoted anything by 21 Savage off the joint album they had, I would have let that rock. But the fact that you quoted something by Drake, it's a no for me, dog. 21, can you do something for me? But in Josh's defense, I will say he's pretty funny. I fucking lost it when he called Marshall NBA Cryboy. Anyways, so this is where it gets very interesting. So all of the contestants go bridal gown shopping, or if you're a guy, you go suit shopping. And Jackie skips her bridal gown fitting. And when Tiffany sees that Jackie is not there, Tiffany texts Brett to let Marshall know that Jackie is not there.
Oh, actually, Tiff just texted me.
Oh, what you said?
Jackie's there for the wedding.
Jackie there for the wedding fitting.
Across the board.
His fiance was like, hey, she's out here at the wedding dress fitting. Damn.
And this is very much Tiffany, Brett, and Marshall are all sidestepping production here. So this is just a production thing. Production wants all of the contestants to go to the wedding and go to the altar. They want the contestants to say yes or no and to make their decision at the altar. They don't want breakups before then, because if everyone broke up before then, there really wouldn't be a show. So it is in Netflix's best interest to do whatever they can to get the contestant to the altar. That's why Tiffany and Brett had to kind of tell Marshall that Jackie wasn't there on the low. And for a better explanation, think about it. Zack and Irina broke up in Mexico. Think about it. If all of the contestants broke up in Mexico, what would we do for the next 5 episodes? Does that make sense? But this also shows that Tiffany and Brett are real friends to Marshall, and Marshall is a real friend to Tiffany and Brett because they wanted to save Marshall from the embarrassment. And don't get me wrong, Marshall was going to be embarrassed regardless, but he saved himself some embarrassment by being stood up now versus being stood up at the altar. And while Jackie is supposed to be at the dress fitting, she's having a coffee with Josh. And Jackie is letting him know she's attracted to him and not Marshall, and that Marshall is way too sensitive for her. And y'all, this part was crazy. Jackie had Marshall looking like an absolute clown. This man is picking out a suit for your wedding, and you are literally having coffee with an ex. Like, the betrayal. Like, how could she do something like that? That was so terrible. Next, if you made it this far in the video, please go ahead and pound that like button for the YouTube algorithm. But in Jackie's defense, I'll give her a little bit of benefit of the doubt. We don't know if this scene with Marshall happened before the dress fitting or after. I don't know. And just in my opinion, I don't think it matters. This is just my personal opinion. I don't think Jackie would have made it to the altar regardless or not if Josh was in the picture. If Josh was not in the picture, I do not think she would have strung Marshall along. I do think she would have broken up with him before they made it to the altar. And a lot of y'all probably disagree with me. A lot of y'all may think that Jackie probably would have strung along Marshall regardless if Josh was in the picture. And again, we don't know the actual timeline of this, but if Jackie did skip her bridal fitting to have a coffee with Josh, that is mad disrespectful. But in her defense, I will say I do think Jackie would have broken up with Marshall before the wedding. She would have broken up with him at some point. I don't know when, but I do think she would have. And while Jackie is talking to Josh, she admits that she was wrong and she chose wrong. She feels like she should have chose Josh instead of choosing Marshall. And we also find out Jackie is unsure if she even wants to get married, but she does want to give a relationship with Josh a try. And this begs the question, why did you even come onto the show in the first place? And like I predicted on my episode 1 review, I'm pretty sure she just came on this show in an effort to try to be an influencer. So then after that, Jackie and Marshall meet up and Jackie breaks up with Marshall. And she says, I cannot love you because I'm attracted to Josh. And Jackie tells Marshall she's emotionally drained and he needed his feelings validated and she cannot give him what he wants. And then Marshall asks for the engagement ring back and Jackie refuses to give it back. And Marshall eventually says he doesn't even care and you can keep it. And their relationship ends. Okay, so just a couple things I want to say about this. First, it doesn't make sense why Jackie chose Marshall over Josh in the first place. I said this on my episode 1 review. We got practically 0 footage of Jackie and Josh in the pods and Jackie and Marshall in the pods. So to us as viewers, it wasn't even clear why she chose Marshall in the first place. And now that things aren't working out, it's not that surprising. Next, during the breakup, Marshall tells Jackie everything has been on your own terms. And Marshall is not wrong. Marshall is constantly validating Jackie's emotions and always walking on eggshells based on Jackie's emotions, but she does not reciprocate that back. And this very much becomes evident when Jackie told Marshall to be more aggressive and to boss up. That is clearly a sore spot for Marshall because that type of advice is something Marshall has received in previous relationships before, and it can be triggering for him. So for Jackie to throw that at him shows that she doesn't give a about his emotions. But Jackie constantly expects Marshall to validate her emotions. Next, Jackie skipped the bridal fitting because she was going through it. Marshall should have seen this as a red flag. Jackie has used the excuse that she's emotional or she's going through it multiple times throughout the season. Marshall really should have seen that as a red flag. Yes, we all have days where we get emotional, and sometimes because of that, we don't want to do things. But Jackie is constantly emotional and constantly using that as an excuse. Marshall should have seen that as a red flag. And last thing before we move on, I want to talk about the ring. So when it comes to these engagement rings, Netflix does not give us enough information. We don't know if Marshall paid for the engagement rings or if Netflix paid for them. If you watch The Bachelor, ABC pays for the engagement ring, and if you don't get married or if you don't stay together for more than 2 years, you have to give the ring back. And sometimes the engagement ring can be like a family heirloom or something, but in this instance, I do not think that's the case because I'm pretty sure Marshall would have mentioned it and he did not. Now, if Marshall paid for the ring, I think Jackie should give it back out of principle, and it's not just a money thing. They were only engaged for like a week or two. Now, if Jackie and Marshall were dating for years and then they got engaged and they were engaged for years, like, yeah, keep the ring, whatever. But they've only known each other less than 20 days. So by Jackie refusing to give back the ring, it makes her look material. And I hate to say it, this is why a lot of men accuse women of being gold diggers. And to wrap this up, I just want to give some final thoughts on Jackie. So a lot of people online are just like, she needs help, she needs therapy. And, you know, that could be true. But honestly, I just think she's for the streets.
She belongs to the streets.
And Marshall came in and tried to save her from the streets, but she didn't want to be saved. And, you know, after this season finishes, I just really would not be surprised if we saw her dating a rapper after this. Now we're moving on to Bliss and Zack, and they meet for the first time. And the first time they meet, they're in like a restaurant or like a local coffee shop or something. And I don't understand why Netflix doesn't continue with the grand entrances. Like, this is the first time they're meeting. Like, why don't you make the entrance more grand? And I know you're not in the pods anymore, but I feel like they could do something better than just having them randomly show up at a restaurant. So when they meet up, Zack makes it clear that there are no expectations. He was just interested in meeting her. And Zack tells Bliss about how after he left the pods, Irina treated him like and Zack admits that he made the wrong choice. And then after that, Zack and Bliss have another date, and Bliss is wearing this tight red dress with a midriff showing. And I was like, oh, she wants him. She would not wear that if she had no interest in getting back with this man. And I really don't have much to say on Zack and Bliss. They're both very nerdy. They are cute. They both make sense, which we learned that in the pods. But the only thing that's different is Bliss is reconciling with the fact that she was second choice. Okay, so just two things I want to say about Bliss and Zack. First, this is going to sound kind of bad, but I'm actually kind of happy that Zack didn't choose Bliss first. Bliss and Zack are boring. And if Zack had chosen Bliss in the pods, their storyline would have been pretty unremarkable. I'm going through my notes and literally all I have is that two nerds fell in love. Next, if I was Bliss, I would not have taken Zack back because I'm petty. But seriously, I am a little petty. And Zack was presented the option of choosing Bliss and choosing Irina, and he chose Irina. And that would bother me. This man had the choice between New York prime rib and McDonald's chicken nuggets, and he chose the McDonald's chicken nuggets. And it just really shows poor judgment on his behalf. And if I was Bliss, I wouldn't be able to let that go. And what makes it worse is he's a lawyer. And don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking McDonald's chicken nuggets. Y'all know they be hitting sometimes. But long story short, Zack made the clear incorrect choice. But I will say, in defense of Bliss taking Zack back, one thing that we do got to think about is when you go on this show, there is a certain level of desperation. Remember, for all of the contestants, dating was not going well for them in the real world. So they decided to go on a Netflix reality dating show. And just in general, I hate to say it, but it's kind of true. It takes a certain level of desperation to go on a show like this. And not only that, Bliss is selling the experiment. She believes in the experiment, and she had a deep connection with Zack. And Bliss probably feels like she will not be able to find another connection like this one. So she does not want to let this go. And if she can get over the fact that she wasn't chosen first, I think their relationship can survive. So Zack ends up taking Bliss on a boat and he proposes to her and she says yes. And I was feeling the entire fantasy of this. I was so happy for their engagement. But the only read I do have is that Zack looked like a mad scientist when he was on this boat. And then after that, Bliss and Zack meet each other's families and there really wasn't much to say here. Netflix really hammed up Zack meeting Bliss's mom and sisters though. Netflix put on the dramatic music and they really heated up the tension because it almost seemed like Zack was going to say something stupid. But the meeting went well. But I do want to talk really quickly about Zack meeting Bliss's dad. So Zack is having a one-on-one with Bliss's dad, Shaw. And I'm going to try to explain this the best I can. But Zack is talking about how he thinks criminals should not have their licenses taken away or something like that. I may not be explaining it perfectly, but that's basically what he's talking about. And I thought this was so annoying because why is Netflix always trying to push some sort of liberal agenda on us? Last season, it was abortion with Nancy and Bartice, and now it's criminal justice reform with Bliss and Zack. And I don't know how Seattle is, but I'm definitely not on Zack's side with this one. I'm in DC and we have horrible traffic, like nightmarish traffic all the time. Please take away more licenses. Get more of these people off the road, please. And second thing I want to say about this, Zack, you need to read the room. And actually, we've been watching Zack all season now, and we know he does not know how to read the room. Shocking. In general, if you meet someone's family, just stay away from politics and try your best to keep the conversation light. And especially in this situation, because Bliss is from Alaska, and if y'all don't know, Alaska is a very red state, so her dad is probably super conservative, so you know he's probably not for the Seattle liberal bullshit. Anyways, moving on. So the next thing I want to say about Zack meeting Bliss's dad, Netflix very much painted Bliss's dad as the villain, but he's definitely not. Bliss's dad was just being realistic. Bliss went on a reality show and got engaged to a man she just met, and now she's supposed to be married in under 30 days. This situation is ridiculous. And her dad was pointing out the fact that it was ridiculous. And not only that, he also mentions that her older sister was in a similar situation and she got a divorce. And Bliss and her older sister, just from looks, to me, they don't seem to be that far apart in age. So her dad just sees how this is likely a bad idea that's about to happen. But Bliss has to sell this experiment. She has to sell the fact that she's in love with Zack and that she's getting married because she wants her dad to attend the wedding. And ultimately, I do think Bliss's dad will attend the wedding, but he's not going to give his support, which is understandable because he doesn't think Bliss is taking marriage seriously. Next, if you made it this far in the video, please go ahead and pound that like button for the YouTube algorithm. So at the start of episode 6, Micah confronts Paul and tells him, Irina told me that she's attracted to you. Did you have any indication of this in Mexico? And Paul does come clean about it. He says, yes, I knew Irina was attracted to me, but I made it very clear I was not interested in her. And Micah responds to this, and it put a little bit of doubt towards the marriage in her head, but she says, ultimately, this is between her and I. And this was so adult of Micah, and I was really not expecting it. In this moment, I really thought Micah was about to drag Paul, but she doesn't do that. She's like, no, I'm gonna confront Irina about this. It's not right. So then Irina and Micah have a one-on-one, and Micah calls out her poor behavior. She says, you were talking about my fiance behind my back. How could you do that? And Irina does not deny anything. So we have to assume it's true. And Irina does eventually apologize to Micah, and she admits she was flirting with Paul. But this moment was a little weird because Micah very much implied that she still wanted to continue being friends with Irina. She asks her, can I invite you over, or will it be weird if Paul's there? Like, she plans to continue being friends with Irina. And not only that, at one point in the conversation, she called her a bestie. Now, I thought Micah was just going to drop Irina as a friend altogether, but she still gives her a chance. And I don't understand why. I truly think Micah should just get rid of Irina and cut her losses. But now I'm starting to think that Irina and Micah were just friends out of convenience. Like, they just connected in the pods and they were friends. And wait, actually now let's just talk about Irina actually. So then fast forward to Chelsea's birthday, all the contestants from the pods meet up and Micah is having a one-on-one with Bliss and they're talking about Irina. Micah says that Irina ostracized herself from everyone in the pods and that she was her only friend. I was her lifeline. So we didn't see see this in the pods, but apparently Irina ostracized herself from everyone in the pods, and pretty much no one liked her, but Micah gave her a helping hand and befriended her in the pods so she had someone. And then Irina betrays her and flirts with her man. So this is a quick sidebar, but I have a point, I swear. So fast forward, Micah introduces Paul to a few of her friends, and one of her best friends, I cannot remember her name, but she does not like Paul, and her and Paul don't get along very well. So when it comes to Micah and Irina, it's possible that they were just friends out of convenience. Micah and Irina got along in the pods, and they were just friends in the pods for the time being. The other possibility is that Irina did ostracize herself from everyone else in the pods, and Micah came in as a lifeline to her. That is a plausible story. Now, my only problem with that story is, why did Micah feel like she had to be the one to extend a helping hand to Irina? Why did she feel like she had to be the person to do that? Is Micah just a genuinely nice person and it hurt her to see Irina ostracize herself like this in the pods? And also, this is very much a plausible story because we saw Micah have a kiki with Jackie and Tiffany. Micah had other friends in the pods. Like, the other women didn't trust her, but she did get along with them. So it is entirely possible that Irina ostracized herself from everyone. But this is just my theory on what I think is happening. I think Micah is just bad at choosing friends. So Micah chose Irina as a friend, and we all saw what happened with that. I don't need to re-explain it to you. And now, on the latest episode, one of Micah's friends from back at home does not get along with Paul, and she doesn't think Micah should marry Paul because she can do better. This is just my theory, but I think Micah in general is just bad at choosing friends. That's just what I think. Okay, now let's move on to Micah and Paul, and not too much happened, so this will probably be pretty quick. So when Micah and Paul get back to Seattle, they have a confessional, and they allude to the fact that they deepened their connection. So as viewers, we're assuming that they finally smashed. Now, in general, Netflix is just keeping us on our toes because in the last scene back in Mexico, Paul was questioning his decision and thought he possibly made the wrong choice by not choosing Amber. But now that we're back in Seattle, Paul and Micah are getting along really well, and I personally see more of a connection. So Netflix is really keeping us on our toes. Like, for a second, I thought they were going to break up, but now it looks like they're going to get married. I don't know what to believe, but Netflix editing's doing a good job. So then after that, Paul's mom meets Micah. And why did Paul's mom come in with his grand entrance looking like a drag queen? But aside from that, Paul's mom was absolutely adorable, and she was surprised at the engagement, but overall, she was very supportive. And Paul's mom and Micah are kind of similar. I'm not going to dive into the specifics of that. This is not Oedipus Rex. We're moving on. And if you don't know what Oedipus is, Google it or get the book from your local library. I'm not going to explain it. You should have read it in high school. So then after that, Paul shows Micah his apartment. And y'all, Paul lives in a Craigslist apartment. So going through Paul's apartment and his things, most of his things are hand-me-downs, or it just looks like he got from Craigslist. And he even says he got his couch off the side of the road.
What do you think of these couches?
Oh my gosh. Where'd you get your couches?
This one's Craigslist, and that one was on the side of the road.
And overall, Micah was pretty appalled at his apartment, but I loved it. We stand saving money on this channel, and furnishing an apartment is not cheap. Paul is young, he's single, and he's comfortable in his apartment, and he didn't spend an arm and a leg to get it. I'm not mad. Also, it's not like Paul's having a ton of people over that he's got to impress or anything, and a lot of my apartment is furnished by Craigslist. We stand. But anyways, in this moment, we also find out that Micah lives in Arizona, so it's not very clear what her situation is, but I think she has two places, one in Arizona and one in Seattle, and she lives between both, but she mostly lives in Arizona. So like I said in the beginning of this video, this goes back to Netflix casting. I thought casting was gonna stick to Seattle and the greater Seattle area, but Micah lives in Arizona, and as we're gonna talk about later, like, Kwame lives in Portland. Why is Netflix casting people who live so far away from Seattle? And Micah was likely able to like sneak by the process, likely because she has 2 places. But again, it doesn't really make sense why Netflix is casting people who live so far from Seattle. And next thing I want to say about this, so Netflix at the beginning of every season really sells the process of this social experiment and really sells Love is Blind. And one of the perks is they're saying this process is better than the app because it's not superficial. And also, I thought another perk of this experiment was that the people who do it live in your area. Like, I thought that was another perk too, but I guess it's not. And this is one of the fundamental problems with dating on the apps, is oftentimes you connect with someone who's not in your area. So don't get me wrong, I am a romantic and I do believe that yes, love does conquer all. But the problem is, if you connect well with someone who's over 100 miles away, more than likely it's not going to work. And in general, I think that is one of the biggest problems with the apps. I don't know how it works, but apparently on the apps, you can connect with people all over the world. And I do think that's a problem. I think the apps should limit people to within 20 miles. And like, as Americans, we kind of have this notion of love conquers all. And if that's your person, you will make it work and you will figure out a way to make it work. But the problem is, in the initial stages of dating, most people are not willing to put in the work to make a long distance relationship work. And yes, there are a few exceptions, but those are exceptions, not the rule. Now, going back to Paul and Micah and to Love is Blind as a whole, I thought one of the beauties of Love is Blind is that they find people in your general area, but this season Paul and Micah are not in the same area, and that sucks because it basically sets them up for failure. So Micah works from home, so it makes more sense for her to move, but Micah also doesn't want to leave with Arizona, and Paul mostly works remote, but he still has to go in the office, and he also doesn't want to leave Seattle. So now they're at a standstill, but it seems like Micah is being more open to moving to Seattle. Anyways, moving on. So after that, Micah introduces Paul to some of her friends. I think it's a friend's birthday party or something. Micah's best friend does not like Paul. She thinks that Micah can do better. So I'm about to make this really basic, but this is just what I think. It feels like Micah and her friends are all sorority girls, and Micah is the sorority girl that fell in love with the scientist. But now her sorority girl friends are like, oh no, he's not good enough. How is he going to fit in with us and our lifestyles? And that's what it feels like is what's happening here. It truly just feels like Micah's best friend doesn't like Paul because she feels like she's going to be embarrassed if they take him to the tailgate. And this is just my opinion. Micah really values the opinions of her friends, but like, I don't think her fiance and her friends need to be friends. Like, yes, they need to be cordial, but they don't need to be friends. Like, you can have your girlfriends when you have girl time, and then you can have separate husband time. Like, you don't really need to bring them together except for like probably a couple events. Next, during Chelsea's birthday, all of the contestants meet up at the bar or whatever for her party. And y'all may have not caught this, but when Amber showed up, Micah clung to Paul so quickly. She grabbed his arm, she kissed him, like she was straight up marking her territory the moment she saw Amber enter the room. Micah was making sure nobody was taking her man. And sidebar, Micah being from Scottsdale, Arizona makes way more sense. Micah does not seem like she's from Seattle, but when she said she was from Scottsdale, Arizona, in my head it clicked. I was like, wow, that makes 10 times more sense. And just 2 more things I want to say about Paul and Micah. On episode 10, I believe, Paul and Micah go to make their own rings. They go to, what's that called? They go to, what's the thing where you put fire on metal? What is that called? It's not a locksmith. Oh, they go to a blacksmith. That's what it's called. They go to a blacksmith. And they decided to make their own engagement rings. I did think this was fun, but I also thought it was super corny. Like, that's definitely not something I would do. Like, I would make a ring for fun, but not specifically an engagement ring. Cause like, low key, what if that comes out looking a mess? You got to wear it for like the rest of your life now. And last thing about Micah, during the bachelorette party, she wore this overcoat in the confessional, and that coat was really cute. And finally, for the last couple, let's talk about Kwame and Chelsea. And right now, I just want to take a moment to give a shout out to the breakout star of the season, Chelsea's dog, Rocky. when Kwame was working from home and Rocky was playing with him in this adorable sweater. Rocky stole my heart. I love this dog. I'm about to steal her dog, actually. And I hope my dog Rose doesn't overhear and get mad because she's jealous. But Chelsea's dog is just absolutely adorable. I want her dog. Anyways, moving on. So at one point, Kwame and Chelsea are talking about household duties, and Chelsea says, I really don't like going to sleep with a dirty kitchen. And from that moment, I knew she was raised right. I agree with her. I would never invite a man over to my house unless the stove was clean. Look. That stove is spotless, y'all. And no, technically you all are not in my home, but through this video, I am inviting y'all into my home, and I would have never invited y'all if my stove wasn't clean. Anyways, after that, Chelsea shows Kwame her apartment, and she has a lot of pink in her apartment, and Kwame asks her about why is there so much pink. And quick sidebar, why does Chelsea still have her Christmas tree up? Like, I thought this was filmed in like April, May, because Chelsea has a birthday party. And she's a Taurus. So why is her Christmas tree still up? And Chelsea says that her ex was controlling and was very controlling over the decorations of the apartment and how the apartment looked. So now her making her apartment pink is her taking back control. And Chelsea has a confessional, and she gets really emotional because she says things got real between her and Kwame. But that's not why she got emotional. She was just drunk off that pink wine. We've all been there. Next, we get to see Kwame's apartment, and sidebar, I really don't like viewing apartments on this show. It makes me kind of sad. So if you're new to my channel, I live in Washington, D.C. and Washington, D.C. is not as bad as New York, but it's pretty close. And when I see apartments in other places, it's just a reminder of how much more space I could get if I lived virtually anywhere else. And also there was a moment with Tiffany and Brett, and Tiffany was looking through Brett's apartment, and Tiffany was like, what? You only have 2 closets? Bitch, I only have 1 closet. Like, I just don't have the patience for it. Tiffany was really low-key complaining about there only being 2 closets. Like, I just don't have the time for it. Enough of that, we moving on. So we find out that Kwame's mom is not supportive of this wedding and this experience for him. And it's weird because Kwame is on speakerphone talking to his mom, but it honestly just sounded like he was talking to the voicemail. His mom never talked back at any point. And later on, before the wedding, Kwame's mom does not show up, but his brother and sister show up, and his dad is also supportive. I don't think we saw his dad, but we do find out he is supportive of the wedding. And just before a wedding, in a confessional, Chelsea says the reason Kwame's mom is not there is due to religious and traditional Ghanaian reasons, but overall it is very vague why Kwame's mom does not support this wedding. And this is a real tough spot for Kwame because Chelsea's family is completely supportive. Her dad is supportive, her mom's supportive, all of her friends and family are supportive, and Kwame has the support from all his family except his mom. And you can tell it's really hurting him not to have support from his mom. And like I said on a previous review, if you watch my Bachelor reviews, we all know when it comes to sons, mom's approval means a lot. And if Kwame doesn't have that approval, it almost looks like there's a good chance they're not going to get married. And at one point in the show, Kwame meets Chelsea's family, and he meets a lot of their family. And the house that they go to, in the backyard, there's a view overlooking the water, and it is absolutely gorgeous. It is one of the most stunning views I've ever seen, and I'm shocked that it's just in Chelsea's family's backyard. Also, shout out to Chelsea's cousin. Me and her got the same name. I'm Dimitri and she's Demetria. Shout out to her. I hope she makes it to the wedding. And during this part, we also find out that Kwame is from Ghana. So I thought Kwame was African, but I was just waiting for him to confirm, and he does. He's from Ghana, and him and his family moved to the States when he was 8 years old. So this is just my theory. I think Kwame's mom not being supportive of the wedding has more to do with traditional Ghanaian culture than it does religious culture, because I'm pretty sure they're Christian, but I'm not African, so I don't know for sure. If you're watching this video and you're from Ghana or have family in Ghana and you think you know why his mom wasn't supportive, please go ahead and put it out in the comments. I'm curious what you think. Next, let's talk about Kwame and Chelsea's living situation. So Chelsea lives in Seattle and Kwame lives in Portland. Again, like how I I said earlier, I don't understand why Netflix casted such a wide net. I thought they stuck to the greater Seattle area, but they didn't. They casted further than that. And now we have Kwame, who lives in Portland, Chelsea, who lives in Seattle, and now they got to make a huge life decision here. So Kwame and Chelsea give Rocky a bath. We find out a few things. Chelsea wants Kwame to move to Seattle. She wants to have kids in a few short years, and Kwame is worried about leaving his life in Portland. And Kwame says,
I'm not sacrificing what I want, but I'm compromising.
Welcome to marriage.
Well, the compromise coming from this side is pretty big.
Okay, so let's unpack this. First, when Chelsea brings up that she wants kids, she asks Kwame, is 3 years okay? And she also says, I've never pictured myself as an older mom. And Kwame responds he wants to travel and enjoy each other first before they start having kids, which is completely understandable. So one thing that I do want to say about this, all women say this. Pretty much all women say, I want to get married young. I want to have kids young. All women say this. This is not something new. So I totally understand wanting to have kids at a younger age. After a certain age for women, there can be a greater chance of complications for kids. So that's why a lot of women want to have kids younger. That completely makes sense. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but in general, in the United States, the age to get married is just trending upward. It's not trending downward. Yes, in the 1920s, the average age for a woman to get married for the first time was 21. And for a man, I think it was like 22 or 23. Now it's, I believe, 28 for women and 31 for men. It's trending upward. And there is a multitude of reasons for this. We don't have time to go over all of them, so we're going to move on. But in general, when it comes to a wedding and when it comes to kids, you have to do things on your relationship's timeline and nobody else's. You have to decide what is best for you and what is best for your husband and what is best for your relationship. And you really need to ignore everything else. And yes, I understand a lot of women feel like their clock is ticking, but sometimes you just got to do your best to ignore it because it would be terrible to bring in a baby into the world and you're not ready for it. Next thing I want to say about this, I agree with Kwame. Kwame is sacrificing a lot and Chelsea is not really compromising or sacrificing on her side. Chelsea wants kids in 3 years. She wants to live in Seattle near her family and she wants Kwame to leave Portland. Kwame is very much making a lot of sacrifices on his end and there aren't really as many on Chelsea's side. Now, I have been thinking this since like episode 2, but I haven't said it because these videos have been long and I didn't think it was important to these reviews, but now I gotta say it. Chelsea likes to wear the pants in the relationship. She does. Chelsea wants a Miranda and Steve type of relationship. And if you know, you know. So in the traditional old school view of marriage, a father gives away his daughter to her new husband. And the daughter is expected to leave the family and start a new life with his family. And that's basically what Chelsea wants, but in reverse. So just in the traditional realm of marriage, a wife typically would leave her old life behind and build a new life with her husband and just move into the life that he has. And I hate to say it, but this is what Chelsea wants. Chelsea wants to wear the pants in relationship. She wants to decide, this is where we're going to live. This is where we're going to have kids. You're moving in with me. Like, she wants everything on her own terms. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but if that's what she wants, Kwame was probably not the best pick. And there are plenty of relationships out there where the woman wears the pants and it works for that couple. But if that's what Chelsea wants, I will say I don't think Kwame is the best pick for that, but we'll see. Next thing I want to point out about this, at one point Kwame says that Chelsea works 7 to 7. And also, if Chelsea wants kids in 3 years, why is she stuck on staying in Seattle? Yes, her family and friends are in Seattle, but if she's working all day and she's gonna have kids soon and probably quit her job when she has kids, why is she so pressed on staying in Seattle? Like, why is moving to Portland such a problem? Also, during the bachelor party, Kwame gives his real feelings on Seattle and he thinks Seattle is very overrated.
I know Seattle's gonna hate me for this, but like, Seattle, you're overpriced. You know what I'm saying? Like, you are Lamar Odom with Michael Jordan prices. You're not that great.
And honestly, this is 2023. The cost of rent is just so high. You could probably say this about any major city in the United States. Like, other than New York and maybe LA, I'm sure everyone has that moment of, is all this money I'm paying in rent worth what I'm getting living here? Like, I live in DC and I think the same thing sometimes. I'm like, is all the money I'm paying in rent, is it really worth it? And quick sidebar, Seattle, in fact, does look a little lame. Anytime the contestants go to like a bar or a restaurant, it just looks really dry. And then Netflix has been showing us drone footage of Seattle, and Seattle just looks so dry. Like, the streets are so dry. Kwame's probably right. Seattle is probably overrated. But seriously, this is supposed to be a major city, and multiple times they've shown drone shots of the city, and there's like nobody in the streets. The streets are like empty. Let me know below in the comments. Have any of y'all been to Seattle or Portland? Let me know below in the comments. Like, is it overrated? Is Portland better than Seattle? What do y'all think? Let me know below in the comments. I've never been to either, so I really have no room to talk. And sorry, one last thing about Kwame and Chelsea before I wrap up this part. I almost forgot to mention this photo shoot. And no wonder Kwame's mother did not support their wedding. Only whores do photo shoots like this. And again, with the influencing, this photo shoot feels like an audition for Kwame and Chelsea to be influencers. And to wrap up this video, let me give my final predictions. So I think Zack and Bliss, Kwame and Chelsea, and Tiffany and Brett, I think they will all get married. And when it comes to Paul and Micah and Jackie and Marshall, I don't think those two couples are going to get married. It's just a feeling I have. I don't know, but we will find out later this week. And that is the end of the episode and the end of this review. If you enjoyed this review, please go ahead and pound that like button, pound that subscribe button, and ring that notification bell, and I will see you all next time. Have a good one. Bye.